Silicon Grapevine. My name is Nitin Dahad, and today my guest is the CEO of Allegro Microsystems, Mike Doogue. Mike, hello.
Hi there, Nitin. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, thank you for joining. So we're going to talk a little bit about your journey, your career, and I guess some of your lessons from an interesting career with Allegro. Uh, but first of all, just tell us a little bit about your role and the company.
So I'm now the CEO of Allegro, which is a tremendous honor and a privilege for me, especially after 27 years working at Allegro. It's actually the only company I've ever worked for, and it's been great to be on a journey of success with Allegro over the last 3 decades. We've grown a lot as a company into a leader in both magnetic sensor ICs and certain types of power ICs like motor drivers and PMICs, and watching that journey over the past nearly 3 decades and contributing to that journey has been, like I said, a real honor and a privilege. And I wake up full of energy, ready to come to work every day and to continue to grow the company. And as we say at Allegro, innovate with purpose.
So yes, just for the purpose of our audience, you became CEO around February 2025, and so after a long career with Allegro, and you started as a chip designer. So we'll go a little bit there. What got you your interest in electronics?
Yeah, so I actually was an electrical engineering student at Dartmouth College, and Dartmouth was an early school that was actually making a small scale race car. So it was the Formula SAE competition, and I actually needed to. I was working on a vehicle navigation system that had a compass inside of it, which was an electronic compass using a magnetic sensor. And I went into DigiKey and I was trying to buy an off-the-shelf sensor to make a little magnetic field probe that would find kind of a magnetic field free, or let's say a least noisy or least perturbed magnetic field area within the car. I found this company called Allegro Microsystems that was selling linear Hall effect sensors. And I actually made a little Gauss probe on the cheap. And surprisingly enough, for me, the sensor division of Allegro was about an hour's drive from Dartmouth. And before you knew it, I was having conversations with the company about what they do, how they, what differentiates them in the semiconductor market. And there's been a 30-year history after that, where suddenly now I'm the CEO of this company that's number one in the world in terms of magnetic field sensors. We ship over 1 billion ICs into various applications every year. And who would have thought that it started just on a little exploratory mission during university?
So yeah, I mean, let's just go a little bit prior to that. Did you have like a family history, the people who are doing electronics, or what? I mean, what at an early age, what sort of made you think I want to study electronics?
It's interesting. I would say that I didn't have a deep passion for electronics at an early age. I was more of a biology guy. I
Okay.
started my university as a biology major, but on my final day of physics class, I realized I was going to miss physics. And I walked over to the registrar and changed my major to physics and
Okay.
quickly realized I didn't want to be a physicist, but applying physics type concepts was really what defines engineering. And I'll be honest, 2 things. My father was an electrician, so somehow I had an appreciation for electricity, and one of my brother's best friends told me that electrical engineering was the hardest type of engineering, and somehow the 2 things together made me wanna be a double E, and I had a real passion for it. There was a professor at Dartmouth, Professor Stratton, who has since retired and unfortunately since passed away, but I can tell you that, we have many classmates working here at Allegro, and we all talk about how he was a really inspirational professor, and he got us very passionate about analog electronics. He added a certain elegance and simplicity to it, and really made it approachable. I found it to be a big game, and that's why I really embraced life as a double E.
And I think one of the things about analog electronics is if somebody can inspire you in that area, because everybody's so digital. So I think when somebody can inspire you, that's even a much more of a commendable thing, I guess.
He was good at inspiration, and you got to remember it was the mid '90s. So while digital electronics was clearly still there, and kind of the massively growing area of electronics. It wasn't nearly as prevalent as it is today, right? So back then, I think there was a little more room to spread your analog wings, so to speak.
There was, but, I mean, there was you're on the wave of a dot-com boom when you joined. I think you joined in 1998, and I think, yeah, that I remember, yeah, that era when, yeah, money was just, yeah, sort of flying into a lot of
Yeah.
the digital stuff. So I think,
That's
it
true.
was, interesting too.
Networking and the internet were exploding, and, what attracted me to Allegro, I think when I came and visited, there was an entrepreneurial culture. So back then, the sensor business was in its early nascent days, and it's now 2/3 of the company. So there was something about the entrepreneurial mindset that I found at Allegro that not only did it attract me, but it really helped. I thrive more in that environment. We were sort of the underdogs of the company. We were having disruptive ideas, and that really gave me a lot of energy and passion to develop different technologies. And honestly, at some point, you hit a wall when you're doing innovation. There's always a point where you're not certain that you're going to cross the chasm. You're not certain that you're going to find a production worthy solution. So you have to have that passion to just stick to the mission and keep grinding away. And, I always found it to be an inspiring place to work, and I still do today.
One of the things you said, about, changing your major from, from biology to physics, and then, to something engineering, that sort of speaks to another skill I think that you, I think I've alluded to, when we were having our prior conversation, which was basically that you were able to communicate well, with customers, and I think that's what sort of made you change from chip designer to a little bit, more broader role. Is that right?
It is totally correct. So, I enjoyed my days as a chip designer. I actually was working with an early mentor who now runs our design center in South America. And I remember him telling me that if you wanted to excel over time as a chip designer, you needed to learn a new circuit every week. And, that sounds like an easy thing to say, but try to do that every week, right? And so many people at Allegro have done that. But I started traveling and visiting customers, and I realized that it was more valuable to have me on the road, that I had more passion for learning about applications, learning about the problems that our customers have and thinking about how to solve them. I had more passion for that than I did sitting down with a textbook and learning the next analog circuit. So I fairly quickly changed into a new role running our strategic marketing group. And then we had 3 business units at Allegro back then. I was lucky enough to run one of the sensor business units, then both of the sensor business units, and then all three of our business units, which included power. So yeah, I have a passion for developing disruptive technology, and I have a passion for selling it too. And I really like working with customers. I really like getting the design win, seeing our products in applications. And like I said, we sell 1.5 billion units roughly every year. So we have all these great examples of seeing our technology out in the wild, and it just gives you that energy to develop the next big idea, to develop the next big product, and see it happen all over again.
Quite interesting because, I have a parallel when I was studying electronics, and all the physics, it sort of made me like really wonder after 2 years, what's the real application? That's why I took my year out to work with National Semiconductor, and then that's where I learned, a little bit more about the real stuff and the engineering, and then went back and then understood a lot more. So I think,
Yeah,
yeah, we have some parallels there, but I think mine
that's
ended up,
great.
yeah, into storytelling, and I think that communications aspect is still key. What are I think you've been through many roles, several roles at, Allegro, but, are there any that, yeah, sort of you think, you really enjoyed? You were carefree and be able to do what you want to do as opposed to having some big responsibilities, or is it always been big responsibilities
Ah,
with teams and things like that?
I've enjoyed them all, right? And that's the lame answer. So let me give you something better to drill into. There was a time when I started, I was working in our speed sensor group, and that they're at the heart of ICE powertrains, camshaft, crankshaft sensors in the heart of transmissions, and they're even used in anti-lock brake systems on the wheels, and they're used internally to EV powertrains as well, especially hybrids. And that was, the growth area of the company. It was right where everybody wanted to be. They're smart sensors. They learn and have algorithms inside. Every time they turn on, they do calibrations and learning, and that was really fun. And then one day, my mentor, Robbie Vig, he became CEO of Allegro. He wasn't quite yet CEO at the time, but he came into us and said, "It's time to start up a new group doing electrical current sensing. This is a great way to use magnetic field sensor technology because the current carrying wire creates a magnetic field. You put a magnetic field sensor next to the wire, and suddenly you can have this galvanically isolated technology where you can be sensing a wire that's at 5 volts or 800 volts. You don't know the difference. You're just sensing the magnetic field." And he wanted someone from an engineering perspective to stand up and lead that group. For some reason, all the speed sensor engineers, and they're tremendous at what they did. I thought the more senior folks might raise their hand. They didn't. The room was awkwardly quiet, so I raised my hand, and that launched a 5 to 10 year period where I worked with just a tremendous team of smart, hardworking, really nice people to create a truly disruptive business line. It was soon thereafter, it was one of the fastest growing business lines within the company. It's still, when we look to the future with all the electrification happening in the world, it is certainly at the top of the list in terms of our most important sensor growth areas. And when we were in the early and mid stages of growing that business, it's that perfect time where you're disrupting markets. You had the killer idea and you found the killer app, but it's not quite big enough yet that all the responsibility rolls in. Managing mature businesses is also a fun role, but when you start thinking about product lifecycle management, optimizing for margins, and all these things, you don't really go through that in the early ramp days of a new business. So it was just a super fun time. I will always look fondly back on that period because not only were the people great, the tech was great, but we all worked hard together and we did a great job. We really created something special there.
And my next question, I think maybe might be the same answer, but what do you feel is like your biggest career achievement? And I'm guessing it relates back to that,
It's
or is there
it's
something
similar
else?
similar to that, but I would say, when I started, like I said, magnetic sensors was really small relative to company revenues, and it grew to be 2/3 of the business the way it is today. We got it to a point where we are number one in the market, and we went public as a company. We were around for decades, but we went public in 2020. And just to know that the team and we accomplished so much together in the area of sensing. It really allowed us to get to the size and scale and to have the business future that warranted becoming a public company. So it was maybe just kind of a good moment in the journey to reflect back on how much hard work went into it, how many great people contributed along the way, and that's something that I'm really proud of.
Now, I'm going to go into a little bit of personal life and then come to lessons for engineers who want to sort of do something interesting. But first of all, what are your personal interests? What do you like to do?
Well, first I have to recognize my family, right? I have a tremendous wife that I met in engineering school. We have 3 kids. And, one of my tricks when you're a busy person is you have to find things that both you love and that people in your family love and your friends as well. So, I
Mm.
look at the Venn diagram of what I like and what they like. And if you can find them overlapping, that's fantastic. So my
That is
wife and
such
I
an
love.
engineering answer.
Yeah, I guess it's practical, but, my wife
Yeah.
and I love to travel, number 1,
Yeah.
we've got our kids into that, but if you wanna know what I'm really passionate about hobby-wise, I love fly fishing. I love all things fishing, but particularly fly fishing. I fly fish in the ocean a lot, which you can do not only here in New England, where Allegro's headquarters are, but all over the world, and I also love kayaking. I love sea kayaking, so, if I wanna have a day to unwind, put a fly rod in my hand, put me near the ocean, and I'm a pretty happy guy.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, that's actually quite good because it's sort of a totally uh, uh, different to what you're doing on your day job. So it's actually quite good as well. Um,
Absolutely.
let's talk a little bit about some of the lessons from the career, and what you'd advise young engineers maybe that want to do something different or want to achieve something or do some of the things you've done.
It's I kinda give advice to my kids now, right? They're getting about that university age, and when I look back, I actually always used to pause and reflect every day at times to think about how could I add maximum value both to our customers and to the company. So the number one piece of advice I have for people starting their careers is really figure out where you can add value. Now that starts to intersect with a few other pieces of advice. When you find you can't do it on every project, but when you find projects or moments in your career, maybe it's a big pitch to a customer, maybe it's a big pitch to the management team internal to your company. It's really important to extend maximum effort. I tell my kids to do the amount of work that you think you need to get done to succeed, and then do about 10% more. And that's part of the value creation process, that when you have something special to contribute and deliver, that's where you apply effort. And you have to identify the right times, and you got to kind of save your energy to put that maximum effort forward at the time that it's critical and really matters most. And being able to identify that is key. I talked a little bit earlier about, raising your hand and embracing new challenges. So I have to point out, right? It might be funny. People would say, you're the guy who's been at the same company for 27 years, but I've probably changed jobs every 3 years along the way, the whole time. And part of that certainly brought on, being uncomfortable, stretching my skill set and my capabilities, and then rising to the challenge to grow and adapt. So, I think those are kind of the pillars that have always come back to contribute and drive my career forward, and really just drive me forward as a person and a leader. And if I have to add at the end, along the way, you have to stay humble. You have to be a good teammate and a good leader. It's a people business, right? The tech matters, but you have to develop relationships with customers and with employees and colleagues, such that you're considered a valuable member of the team. When I say add value, it's just not economic value. Sometimes it's teamwork value as well.
Okay. Last question. Uh, what are the big differences you see in being like where you're an engineer or yeah, like and where you're top of the company as a management? What are the big sort of cultural mindset differences that you think you had to go through?
Yeah, I would say if I narrowed it down to just one, right? I mean, a lot of engineers are used to putting a project on their own shoulders and driving to an answer. And as you climb the ladder, at some point, it's more about the team. You have to build the right team, paint the right vision, and it's not really you showing up and providing that innovative idea all the time. You have to
Yeah.
empower the team, give them the ecosystem and the environment that they need to succeed. And
Mm.
I'm very comfortable with that. We talked a little bit. It's sort of like I wasn't the best chip designer. So I kind of moved into a space where I could define what roadmaps and new technologies wanted to look like. So that was the first step in the journey, to say, you have to recognize what your strengths are, and then build an ecosystem and a team that has the strengths required to get the job done. And as a leader, you pivot more into an enabler position than an individual doer.
Well, Mike Doogue, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you very much for joining us.
And this was great. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.